And have you heard of the doctor's plot? In 1953, Stalin actually tried to exterminate all the Jews in the Soviet Union. It was almost the second Holocaust. It's a really fascinating story. On January 9th, in the state newspaper, Pravda, they published an article that's saying that Jewish doctors are poisoning Soviet officials. There's a secret conspiracy among Zionists funded by the Americans to poison Russian officials, Soviet officials, even Stalin. They're attempting to assassinate Stalin. And so there was a huge wave of anti-Semitism in January, February 1953. And guess what? Stalin said we're going to make he commissioned 4 concentration camps in Kazakhstan and Siberia. And he said we're going to take all the Jews and bring them to these concentration camps for their own protection, because the Russian citizens are so passionately against the Jews for harming our people. And so Stalin planned on March 6th, 1953, to start deporting Jews to these gulags, these concentration camps, and to, finish. He had his own final solution for the Jews. And guess what happened? They were supposed to start deporting them on March 6th.
It was Purim.
That's right. It was Purim, just a few days after Purim. The deportations were going to start March 6, 1953. Stalin died March 5th, 1953, the day before. So the 1st of March was Purim. On Purim, Stalin was found unconscious, or the day after. He was found unconscious and bleeding in his room. And he died on the 5th. There's a famous story of the Lubavitcher Rebbe who gave a sikha that night on Purim. And he was actually talking about the Soviet Union and the Russian Empire. And it was a very bizarre story. He was talking about when the Tsar of Russia was deposed, and the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe asked all his Hasidim to go vote. Like, you guys have to go vote. Now that we have democracy, we have to be good democratic citizens and do our part. And he basically gave a story about how Russians were, one of the Hasidim saw Russians screaming, hurrah, 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 right? Like, hooray. And this Hasid, who didn't know what they were saying, he probably only spoke Yiddish, thought that they were saying hurrah, that he's evil. So he thought that they were all saying that the Tsar was evil, the Caesar was evil, and he's finally gone, the king of Russia. And so the Rebbe started saying hurrah, 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 and the Hasidim were like weird in the sikha. They thought something strange was going on, and they didn't realize that at the same time. So, like Chabad thinks that, like Chabadnikim will tell you that the Rebbe did something like on a spiritual level that affected events that were going on in Moscow, and maybe he did, because at the same time in Moscow, Stalin was having a mishteh, a party with his buddies, with his top officials, and it seems like they poisoned him. So his head of his secret police, Lavrenti Beria, probably maybe either slipped something in his drink or into his food, more likely, and so then. Yeah, Stalin didn't recover from that, and they made sure that doctors wouldn't get into he collapsed in his room that night, and they made sure that no doctors would go in there for a very long time, and then Stalin died. And you should read a great book called Stalin's Last Crime by Jonathan Brent and Vladimir Naumov. Very interesting book that goes into this and shows everything that we know about this event. And in 1956, the next leader of Russia, Khrushchev, right, he gave a famous secret speech where for the first time they started to denounce Stalin, which would have before that been unthinkable. And in his secret speech, he actually suggested very clearly that they did him in. They personally assassinated him because he was planning to purge them. It seems like he had gone completely nuts. He was planning World War III. He was going to use the doctor's plot as a way to blame America for trying to assassinate him and launch a preemptive strike against America. So his own guys said, okay, that's enough. That's enough of Stalin. And they poisoned him. And Lavrenti Beria actually apparently boasted and said, yeah, I saved all you guys, I killed him. And So, and it happened on Purim, which is amazing because just like on Purim, we have Haman who was trying to exterminate all the Jews, and Stalin, in Haman fashion, was trying to kill all the Jews shortly after Purim, and himself died. Venafochu, everything was upside down. Just a last little note on that. In the book, in Stalin's Last Crime, the authors point something really cool. They say that their main problem for Stalin and his police with the doctor's plot was that there was a Jewish doctor, a woman, who refused to confess. They tortured all the Jewish doctors to confess, but one of them wouldn't confess. And that's a problem, because if one claims innocence, then it ruins everything. You need everybody to confess, or else, it doesn't work. And she refused to confess, even though she was, terribly... That she was, they were torturing these doctors, these innocent doctors, to confess that they were trying to assassinate Stalin and that they were poisoning Russian officials. And the others were like tortured so badly that they said, okay, whatever, right? They confessed under torture. But she did not confess, even under torture. Her name was Sophia Karpai, and their authors write really beautifully. They wrote, "It satisfies the imagination to think that the fate of the Jews of Russia might have depended on this latter-day unknown Esther." Right, which is really nice. That it was again a woman who held out and who was able to staunch their plans for a very long time, a Jewish woman, and helped to prevent this catastrophe. But anyway, the KGB Stalin's death didn't stop the Soviet attack on the Jews and on Israel in particular. And so I just want to point out, and we're going to end with this, Russia's role in the Arab-Israeli conflict, or the Soviet role in the Arab-Israeli conflict. And also this comes from a really good article that I can link to by Eli Cohen and Elizabeth Boyd, which points out a few things. That the founder of the PLO, of the Palestine Liberation Organization, is the KGB. Okay. This was hatched by the KGB. Yasser Arafat and Mahmoud Abbas, who's still the president, were KGB agents. Mahmoud Abbas, it's not a secret that he studied in Moscow. He did his PhD in Moscow. You know what his PhD was on? The current president of the PLO, this never-ending dictator, he's been the president. He was elected, whatever it is, 15 years ago for a 5-year term, and he's still the president. You know what his PhD is on? On denying the Holocaust. He wrote a PhD on that the Holocaust didn't happen. And by the way, other sources, very well sourced, that Mahmoud Abbas was originally a KGB agent in Damascus. He was a KGB secret agent operating in Damascus first, before he became dictator for life of the Palestinians. So all these people were KGB agents. The KGB and the Soviet Union armed the Palestinians, all their terrorists, including the Entebbe. The Entebbe attack was planned, and they were armed by the USSR. Even more scarier than that is something that was called by the KGB Operation SIG, and Operation SIG was basically to undermine Israeli, also American democracy, every way that they could, and to infiltrate every aspect of Israel, and also to change world opinion about Israel, to make Israel the enemy. The Zionists are the enemy. Remember, it was the Soviet Union that sponsored the UN resolution that supposedly claimed that Zionism is racism, right? Which was later repealed in 1991. It was Resolution 3379 in 1975. And it was revoked by the UN in 1991. But the resolution was that Zionism is equivalent to racism. The head of the KGB, Yuri Andropov, he said, quote, "We have only to keep repeating our themes that the United States and Israel are fascists, imperial Zionist countries bankrolled by rich Jews. They just have to keep repeating it, and eventually people will believe it." It's like total brainwashing operation.
That was Joseph Goebbels.
Right, yeah, same idea, same playbook. And to this day, you see that conspiracy that was hatched by the KGB, that rich Jews and Zionists are plotting to take over the world. They run, right? The Elders of Zion. Who wrote the Protocols of the Elders of Zion? It originally published in Russia, right? And those same conspiracy theories, you still see them today, right? You send them to me all the time, right? The evil Jews are controlling the world. The Zionists are controlling the world. Right? It's really a product of Russian and later Soviet and KGB propaganda. It was really all a KGB plot to divide and conquer, right? Destabilize Western societies, transform them. Maybe you've seen this interview with Yuri Bezmenov. Have you seen this?
Bezmenov is the...
So he's a KGB agent that defected to Canada, actually. I think he lived in Windsor in 1970. And he gave an interview in 1984 where he outlines the KGB plans to destroy the United States. And if you listen to this interview that was given in 1984, today it's precisely what has happened to America. He said, our goal is to, basically he said, the KGB is not what you think. It's not an espionage organization. That's not the point. The KGB is it's a subversion organization. It's about infiltration, right? And it's a brainwashing organization. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start with the academics. We're going to make them left-leaning, communist. We're going to start splitting the country on all kinds of lines, by gender, by race, black versus white, like all these things, class, by what. We're going to split the country. We're going to divide and conquer. We're going to get everybody to hate each other, and we're going to destroy the country from the inside. And he goes...